The opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Cable 14, its sponsors, or its shareholders, Cogeco Cable, Shaw Cable, and Source Cable Limited.
And welcome to the December 13th edition of For the Record. And today on FTR, it's the O Show with Loren Laura and Laura Babcock. I am Larry Ianni, host of the program, and the agenda for today talks about these things. Was that an apology for Mayor Bob Bratina? And was it too little too late? And a living wage for Hamilton city workers? Do they deserve it? Can we afford it? And who should pay for the toxic cleanup at the airport? That and more on the O Show. And let's meet our panel right now. We have Loren Laura. Welcome, Loren.
Pleasure to be here.
And of course, Laura Babcock. And Laura, you always begin with some updates.
Well, as you know, Larry, last week the O Show broke the story about the $30,000 raise to the Mayor's Chief of Staff, Peggy Chapman, and I have to say I have never seen so much activity on social media about any topic this show has ever covered before. So we've had a ton of feedback, and we've been watching this story extremely carefully. And you know, one of the things that we try to do here at the O Show is to inform. You know, Loren and I try to stay up to date. We try to stay informed. And so as this story built out from last week, as you know, we came on the air and we said that we were told that the mayor's office didn't ask for the raise. Peggy didn't ask for the raise. They didn't give the raise. They more or less got information from HR. Now, that came out, of course. They repeated that to the Spectator in an interview. They repeated it essentially in the Spec's editorial board on Thursday. But that didn't sit well because then, of course, the HR department came out and said, actually, that's not how things went down. They said, you know, it was in fact we were asked to give the salary ranges, we provided them, and then the mayor's office made the decision. Now, as you know, Larry, council then went in camera, weren't happy about that situation, weren't happy about city staff being put in the mix, if you will, and they had decided that today they were going to have an in-camera session. There was a big push yesterday on social media to have that brought out into the public, and so what happened before that session started at 9:30 this morning was that the mayor's office circulated to council, which I understand the Spectator got a hold of, an apology to council colleagues and, you know, and to the city staff. And we have that full apology that we're going to put up on the screen, and I'll read through it. And we've also got something else that I want to show you first, though. One of the things that was stated in that apology was the fact that, you know, the mayor said there was a misunderstanding, that his words misspoke, whatever, the fact that the HR were not the instigators of this. But it still sounded, at least to us, that it was a temporal, meaning this is something that had happened relatively recently. We could be very wrong about this, but we did find on the record, publicly, something that Cable 14 had in our archives where the mayor discusses this issue. It's a short video, and I think it's germane to the conversation and to trying to get the story straight. Let's have a look.
My own chief of staff who is here, who's done such a wonderful job, when we were looking over the salaries over the past several years of people in that position.
Okay, Laura, carry on from there.
Yeah, and I think the clip goes on to, I think we might have cut it a little bit early, talks about their decision-making around the compensation that they decided on. That was February 2011. So I put that out there for the viewers to assess in their own right, because one of the things that's really frustrated me about this particular story, Larry, is that there's been some attempts at obfuscation here. It has not been clear. There has been changing of words. It's been going back and forth for a week. Not since Pan Am have I had people coming up to me everywhere, and I'm sure Loren had the same experience, probably you did as well, saying, what is going on with the mayor's office? What is going on with this raise? So, you know, the mayor's apology to city staff today that he gave to his council colleagues may well have satiated council's bloodlust, if you will, because, I mean, they were going to come after him on this. But all it did was, if I can extend the analogy, throw chum in the water, in the public waters, because people looked at the apology and they saw a couple of things. One of them was the use of the word misunderstanding. As a communications expert, I look at words really closely. Misunderstanding will imply that the receiver of the communication had some kind of onus in not quite, you know, decoding it properly. It's not putting all the weight on the person who sent it or the encoder, in this case, the mayor. So using misunderstanding suggests that somebody misunderstood on the other end. Was it the media who misunderstood? Was it us who misunderstood on the O Show? Was it council who understood? HR? The public? I need to know an answer to that question before I can wholly take that as an apology from the mayor. Not HR might be very happy with that, and council seems satiated, although a couple of them have already broken ranks. But it's the fact that the apology to me sounded like it was equivocating a little bit, and it didn't take it out to the bigger question. If he had just come out up front and said, I believe in pay equity. I believe maybe the mayor's a feminist. I believe that she should get what other men have made in this role. I'm going to give her a raise so she can catch up. It's a big amount of money, but I stand by it. As a mayor, she works for me, and I have a discretionary budget, and I'm going to give it to her. It would have been the end of the story. But it has been the fact that there has been this back and forth. And a question I also want to ask is, if council hadn't pushed and weren't going to have this big meeting today where the mayor was going to have to speak to them, would this apology have come out at all? So there might be very good answers to those questions, but I'm left feeling I'm not satiated, and I don't think the public out there is either. I think this story is not gone, as some councillors would like us to believe. I think that the mayor's office has a little bit more explaining to do, not about her deserving that money, because there's a pay scale to say that, but about how they've handled it to this point.
Laura, you mentioned the apology, and we do have it. Maybe we can read through it. Let's call it up on the screen, and maybe Laura, you can take us through it.
Dear colleagues, I met personally with Helen Hale-Tomasic yesterday and this morning, and she's of course the head HR person involved, over the phone to personally and directly apologize to her. I also read her the following statement, which I'm now forwarding to you, members of council. Quote, I recently answered a reporter's question about a pay increase to my chief of staff. The statement I made was very brief, with the intention of protecting the privacy of my employee as required by employment law. Unfortunately, my comments were not well worded and taken to mean unintentionally that the HR department initiated or directed the higher salary. For this, I take full responsibility. This is not the practice of the department, and it was not the intent of my brief response to the reporter to suggest this. However, since my statement caused discomfort, I asked to meet with the Director of Human Resources and expressed to her my regret and made a personal apology. I also apologize for any misunderstanding or discomfort caused by my words to the Human Resources staff, members of council, and the community. Respectfully and sincerely, Bob Bratina. So Larry, my last comment on this, before I know Lauren's got a lot to say as well, is this. I've always been a fan of a full and equivocal apology. Now, if this is taken as being that by council for the role of HR in this self-made mess, then you know what? That's their prerogative. Sitting as a member of the media, sitting as somebody in the community who tries to be responsive to them on this program, I have heard that the apology does not cover the changing of the story that's been happening over the last week, because what that does is it erodes confidence and trust in the mayor's office, which I don't think has to happen in this case. It's very frustrating to watch how this has played out.
All right, let's go to you, Loren. Does this meet the standard?
I'm sorry, am I on television today too?
Eventually.
You are. Go ahead, Loren.
That's great.
Did you want to read the statement, Loren?
Well, obviously I can't read, but besides any of that, I don't understand when there's a misunderstanding, when there should be no misunderstanding, when there's potential lying, when a lie wasn't necessary. I don't understand why that came to be. If in fact that a pay raise was given to Peggy Chapman in some sort of response from the local newspaper suggesting that she should be terminated, I don't know why any excuse needed to be attached to it whatsoever.
What are you saying?
I think the timing of all of this is when we read Dreschel's article, which was baiting our mayor to fire his chief of staff because in Andrew Dreschel's opinion, she is not qualified. The response, which may or may not have been a response, but the timing certainly made it sound like one, was, screw you, Andrew, she's not going anywhere, and I'm giving her a big raise.
So this is Andrew Dreschel's fault?
No, that's not Andrew Dreschel's fault. The point I'm trying to make is that statement could have existed on its own. It doesn't need to be because of HR, pay equity, because she's a woman who didn't get paid as much as dudes. None of that matters. Jumping back to that video clip we only saw part of, suggesting that Peggy is only making so much, and that's where I think it's entirely reasonable that a year into the job, that both as an overall staff and an office, and Peggy as an individual, have a year under her belt and see that it was a lot more work and that her value to that office is a whole lot more. I think it's utterly nonsensical to be discussing who said what and how this came to be. The mayor has his budget. The mayor determines it. That's what he did. He didn't need to pass the buck on the reasonings why. But the bigger story I'm hearing on the street is, as how outrageous a $30,000 raise is and how outrageous 120 grand is. And that conversation could only exist in this pathetic left-wing city whereby 120 grand for a qualified, hardworking person is seen as obscene. More so than anything else, I'm hearing it from professional women, like this is some sort of climb the ladder and scratch each other's eyes out. I have been,
what are you talking about?
I have been horrified by the women I'm hearing with no woman is worth 120 grand to run the.
Who isn't?
I'm just suggesting that this is not crazy money, and that kind of an increase to put her in line is, I don't care about the money. How we got to it was utterly unnecessary.
Okay, if I can on a couple of
Laura,
points
before you go,
sure.
we do have, production tells me that we can run the full video again. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, of course.
My own chief of staff who is here, who's done such a wonderful job, when we were looking over the salaries over the past several years of people in that position, she decided on her own that she would take $20,000 less on an annual basis than what had been paid.
All right, Laura, go ahead. Pick it up.
I think that the rest of the clip is germane. If I can get a couple of points Lauren made, I think we're on the same page, Lauren and I, on this, of the fact that this did not need to happen the way that it has happened. If the mayor felt with his discretionary budget, of which he hasn't spent his full amount, he wanted to give a staff a raise after reviewing her work, that's his prerogative. Now, $30,000 catch-up salary in one lump chunk is pretty risky in this economy, not just in Hamilton. And, you know, if they'd announced it being phased out, or if they explained better about the raise and less about trying to say who it came from and all of that obfuscation, it would have played much better than it did. So Lauren and I agree. Listen, if you're working at that level, and it is a pretty big job, and other people before you for years have been making more, then you should be paid commensurate with that. It's a lot of money, yes, I understand in Hamilton. I totally understand. It's a lot of money. And in a single raise, that's somebody's year's salary, and that is, you know, the optics of that are terrible. The mayor's office could have even handled that, as I said, in a phased-in manner or explained it better, just so that people in Hamilton understood why she was getting that kind of money more clearly. As soon as they started, as Lauren said, to unnecessarily loop in HR and all of this, they cause problems. Now, what Lauren said, which I think is pretty explosive, is he's suggesting that the timing of this was a direct response to the article in the Hamilton Spectator we talked about, I believe it was last week, him saying, you know, the mayor can't admit that it was a mistake to hire Peggy. Are you saying, Lauren, here on the air, that this $30,000 raise was done as a, you don't think she's worth it, I'm going to give her a big raise to prove something?
I'm not saying that I know anything, but at the very least, the timing of the announcement of Peggy's raise sends a real message to the public, to the spectator from the mayor's office, that our mayor has nothing but faith in his chief of staff.
So it further makes the HR came to us with this argument even less palatable, right? I mean, I know they've moved from that argument and they're not saying that. They're misspeaking as
whether or not this raise was agreed upon months ago, that their response to go public with it can't be ignored. And I think that's great.
Well, can we get to the bigger thing behind this? And let's just suppose, okay, council's satisfied with the apology. I clearly am not satisfied with the apology. I don't think most people are, because I don't think it touches on the bigger issues of why did the story change and why did it take council threatening, you know, censure. The Hamiltonian put out and asked councillors a couple of days ago, how do you feel? Marula and I believe it was Whitehead went on the record there saying, you know, we need to hear something from this mayor. So the mayor was under the gun. That letter I see as a preemptive way of trying to avoid that in-camera session. If that satiates council, then council can be accountable to why that's okay with them. That's their internal business with HR. But the bigger issue here is what is troubling to me. We're a year and a half into a mandate. As I've said on this program, I think the mayor has handled the media poorly, but I think they've moved some important agendas down the road very well, like area rating, like the situation with Pan Am and others, and even taxes. I don't think that something like this, I think it's unfortunate because it's going to erode trust and confidence in the mayor's office. You might not have voted for Bob Bratina, but I think that people thought, nah, you know, they might not like LRT, they might not like this and that and the other thing. But this has caused people in the public to say we cannot trust this mayor.
I don't believe.
I think that's what's happened.
I don't believe for an instant that this was an HR.
I don't think it was either.
But I find it very difficult that somebody from HR came up and said that's not true. This was a Bob, we caught you lying again.
So you're saying that this was council encouraging HR to challenge
in fact, just for the record, it was council asking HR how this came to be that HR. They didn't volunteer. They explained their role in it.
So to my point then, so the broader questions that I have, concerns I have now, is how much has this eroded the trust in the mayor's office? Again, not the salary necessarily, but the way it's been handled. And secondly, what kind of games are going on behind the scenes? We talked about this last week when we said here on the air, we don't mind if council doesn't get along with the mayor's office as long as they're not embarrassing the city and things are getting done. How much gamesmanship was involved in, as Loren's suggesting, getting HR to come out and challenge the mayor on this and blow this into the brouhaha?
Some people like the mayor, some people don't. I don't know anybody who likes a neutered mayor.
Well,
and
listen,
we've got 2.5 more years.
Right.
Let's leave those as important questions to ask. Laura, you said that this story might have legs yet.
Only because of the handling of it, not because of the initial thing.
Yeah,
and
indeed.
I'll say this one last time. 30,000 in one lump sum is hard for this city to take. I understand that. It was played, I mean, it could have been phased in. It could have been done in a much more palatable way to bring her up to pay equity.
Well,
that was a mistake. But the handling of it has caused the real problem.
Well, in fact, especially, and let's deal with this for a couple of minutes because it juxtaposes what you've just been saying, Laura. There was a delegation before council yesterday asking that council support Hamilton becoming a living wage city as opposed to a minimum wage city, where anybody who works for the city and hopefully other businesses in the private sector as well bump up their salaries from minimum wage, which you can't make ends meet with if you're earning that amount, to living wage. And that juxtaposes with this, doesn't it, Laura? Let's start with you. What do you make of that story?
Oh, it absolutely does. And I produced the content of the program. I put the stories back to back because I think it juxtaposes beautifully. I mean, here we have on the one hand this conversation happening at that level, and we also have in the same very week in council, in fact, it was back-to-back days, a delegation coming forward producing a report that says that Hamilton should pay its workers minimum or a living wage, which is over $14 an hour versus what some of them are currently making now. I have always supported paying a living wage. If you look at the numbers, 30,000 people who work in this city, not just for the city, but in this city, are living in poverty, but they're still working. That doesn't make sense. That's not right. I think, and the stats seem to prove it out, that the impact of becoming a living wage city is 1/10 or something. It's very small impact on the city, but it could make a huge impact in all these people's lives. The people who work for the city staff, of which I think I saw 1,400 or something as a number, and the broader community if other businesses adopt this. So years ago, the Hamilton Civic Coalition, a group of business leaders, discussed this. Back then, I made these same statements. I think it's the fair, humane thing to do. Pay people what they deserve.
Loren, you use the words, left-wing city, and if you think that people at the high end deserve $120,000 if they work hard, surely people deserve a living wage.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Wow. No. And living wage means the living wage that we're discussing here from the Poverty Roundtable, or
right.
people deserve to. Yeah, there's a couple of things that are complete bunk as far as I'm concerned. There's no way 1,400 people work for the city of Hamilton, not in the city of Hamilton, but for the unionized shop that is the city of Hamilton, and don't make $14.50 an hour. That is a lie. That is crap.
That's
what are
the
those
numbers I just got from the
But there's
Hamilton
not a
Record.
chance.
They
There is
just
not.
sent me this
Summer students
just now.
make more than $14 an hour
They
for the
said
city
some
of
cleaning
Hamilton.
staff. They said some people who
Contract employees are not City of Hamilton employees. And the coffee shop inside there, which is a franchise, the City of Hamilton has no business telling anybody what they should pay elsewhere.
So they're misrepresenting the numbers in the report?
Well, I would think so. I would like to see 1,400 unionized city employees who don't make $14 an hour.
It's an
alarmist number. Second of all, in the letter to the editor, the submission piece on it, that the worldwide accounting firm KPMG has signed on for this. Are you kidding me? There's somebody at KPMG who's not making $15 an hour? That's nonsense. But what I didn't see sign on, but I did see them advocating for everybody else to, was the Hamilton Spectator. So are they going to triple the pay for their delivery boys? I don't get this at all. And this breaks down to this. If everybody who works at McDonald's is starting on the first day and has no experience to be the French fry guy, you must pay the one who doesn't have any kind of safety net more. Whatever happened to merit? Because you are a single mother with a whack of babies does not mean you should be paid more. It means we should have opportunities for training and education. But that doesn't mean you are an employee worth receiving more money. And it is entirely backwards against any sort of meritorious system, and it makes no sense.
Okay.
That somebody doing the same job as a kid who's living at home, who's only saving money for university, doesn't need a living wage.
Okay, you understand, Loren, that there's a minimum wage in this country because
I understand
the whole
that.
argument that you make on merit and probably trickle-down economics or whatever else you want to pull out, that whole argument you're making that people should get paid based on merit, they should pay their dues. I was the fry guy at McDonald's years ago, and I remember getting minimum wage.
Yes.
And if I had to be the fry guy in this economy at 18 or 19 living on my own making that, I would be in poverty. What they're saying is that if people are going to work, get up and not be on any kind of assistance, actually have a full-time job, and they still can't, they have to prioritize food over utilities, there's a problem there. And the city should lead by being equitable and humane and saying, listen, we are going to pay our employees a living wage. My employees, once they get past their 3-month probation period, I would immediately move them up to whatever the living wage was, because I don't believe, whether they're in university and they're saving or they're single moms at home, that they shouldn't get a living wage. I think it's the only thing we should be doing as a society, and we can afford it according to these stats. We should be doing it. It will lift people out of poverty. Now, one last thing on this. Yeah. I've heard for the last 5 years, people go on and on and on about how we want to, eradicate poverty in Hamilton. We want to lift people out of poverty, poverty roundtable, poverty, poverty, poverty. We've talked on this show about, does that diminish the brand of the city because we put so much public emphasis on poverty? I don't think that it does, but if we're going to have that important public conversation and a report comes out that says this is something we can afford to do that will have a real impact on poverty on this city, I don't know how you can dismiss it so quickly because of some meritocratic system that you happen to espouse. Look at it from the facts that they're giving and say, can we do a little bit here that is going to lift some of the people in this city out of poverty? If that's what the report is saying, then we should take serious heed of it.
All right. Loren, did you want to one quick last comment?
No, I guess I've learned better now, and that's just the way it is.
It's my job.
I wondered, no, but is Tom Cooper going to send a check to the self-employed who are not making $15 an hour? How about that?
Well, I'm self-employed. It's tough being
Sure, and
self-employed,
sometimes you work harder than 40 hours a week to make ends meet and do stuff. I just think this is not the right way of doing things. We have a wonderful social safety net. And if you are not making enough money, go back to school, learn to type.
All right. Listen, with that challenge, we will have to come back. We had a third topic. We may pick it up after the break, so please stay tuned. There is more on the O Show, but first this.
Laura Babcock's Hair by Madison Avenue Salon and Spa, 169 Locke Street South. Call 905-527-4080. Laura Babcock's Wardrobe by Pennington's in the Gage Square Plaza, 601 Upper Gage. Call 905-388-2091.
And welcome back to the O Show with Loren and Laura. I am Larry Ianni. And panel, right now it's time for my oration, and I want to ask who is to blame over the U.S. Steel deal or the settlement that the federal government made with U.S. Steel. We now know that, in fact, the federal government has cut a deal with U.S. Steel, avoiding a court battle over U.S. Steel's flouting the Canadian Investment Act. In return for dropping the suit, U.S. Steel promises an additional $50 million investment in Hamilton and Nanticoke and $3 million to be given to community groups or projects in the two municipalities. Maybe this is the best that can be done, but the critics are saying not good enough. In fact, Wayne Marsden, MP for Hamilton East Stony Creek, denounced the settlement. So has the union president from Nanticoke and maybe others as well. So whose fault is this if this settlement is lacking? Have we really been sold down the river? Could more have been done? Are the Conservatives looking after Hamilton? And is this proof that electing so many NDP MPs really doesn't assist the community when the going gets tough? Panel, what do you think? Let's start with you, Loren.
Well, I'm not entirely sure where we're going to put blame here, though. But I don't know how you can take somebody to court because of a breach of trust, because you had an agreement, you had a contract that wasn't fulfilled, and then your conclusion on making that lawsuit go away is to engage in another situation where trust through an agreement is going to, that just defies any logic. The furthermore is, and I know I'm supposed to fit the bill here and defend the Conservative Party, but I haven't heard this being defended by Conservatives. Now, that might tie into your point, Larry, as who really here is going to explain this as opposed to defend this. Obviously, Christopherson, Charlton, and Marsden are going to criticize it, but I don't know what the explanation. Is this the best we could have got for this community? And Nanticoke, I don't know, and that's what the NDP give us.
Laura.
You know, not much renders me speechless, Larry. But when Loren almost verbatim quotes a union leader's response to something the Conservative government does, I have not much more to say. I think he's right. It's the same thing the union leader said. How can we have confidence in a contract that's based on trust when the former contract was broken?
Well, listen, we'll have to wait to see for some explanations. But Loren, let's start with you. And we left the topic off in the first round, and it had to do with the toxic cleanup of PFAS, some contaminants that were used in the 80s up at the airport. We've got just time for a quick comment. Loren, let's start with you.
Sure.
What information have you got?
Yeah, well, it's my understanding there's a whole lot more than what is being reported so far, and much more to come. For example, the airport back in the day had its own septic system, and there was all kinds of runoff thereof, and it wasn't tied in, and it wasn't monitored properly. Back before the extensions came in the 70s and 80s, where the private hangar now exists, the air fire department used to use all kinds of chemicals that by today's standards would not be appropriate in fire extinguishing. But what it is that the community around that area used, I'm not sure I'm explaining this properly. There was a hull of a plane, and I'm sure they're not called hulls, that was on fire for drills all the time and then put out. And the chemicals that were used back then, since the 30s through the 50s, whatever, to practice this, were not cool by today's standards. Furthermore, it's my understanding that that was used as a toxic dump site, an illegal bring your stuff, it'll just get torched by the airport fire department. There is a ton of leaching and a ton more to come in on this.
Just a quick comment. We've got about 20 seconds, Laura.
Well, it sounds like Loren's got an inside track and a scoop. I mean, obviously, if this was happening under the federal government's ownership of the airport, then the feds should ante up and pay for it and not put the burden on an overtaxed city as it is. But I want to hear more of Loren's scoop.
Well, we're going to have to bring this back as a topic because it deserves that. Let me thank you, Loren and Laura, for your comments today. And let me thank the viewers for watching. The O Show will be back December 20th. Thanks for watching.